They gave me 4 hours to fail. That was the deal, and nobody hid it from me. I had 4 hours alone with the Vesh cipher, and when the clock ran out, they would walk me back to the transport, wipe my access, and tell the next human the same thing they told me. The galaxy had been failing in front of this thing for 900 years. They expected me to fail faster and quieter and then go home. My name is Wendell HFY. I fix languages for a living when there is work, which is not often. I read the ones nobody else can read. I am not famous. I am cheap. That is why I was standing in a freezing white room on a station that orbited a dead star, looking up at a slab of black stone 14 meters tall. The cold was the first thing. They kept the room near freezing because the cipher hummed when it got warm, and the hum did something to the older species that they did not like. I am human. The hum just made my teeth ache. So I stood there with my breath fogging the air and my fingers going numb inside my gloves, and I looked at the thing that had beaten everyone smarter than me. It was covered in marks, thousands of them, every face of the stone, top to bottom, edge to edge, crowded with little shapes that curled and stacked and tangled into each other. They did not look like writing. They looked like frost on a window if frost could think. The light in the room moved over them, and for a second I would swear the marks moved too, but that was just my eyes being tired. A door opened behind me. I did not turn around. I already knew the sound of those legs. "You are wasting your allotment," it said. Its name was longer than my whole family tree, so I called it 7 in my head and never out loud. It was Kelty. The Kelty are the reason mathematics exists in a useful form across half the galaxy. They think in numbers the way I think in breakfast. 7 was tall, thin, made of angles, and it had folded itself in the doorway in a shape that meant, in their body language, mild disgust. "I have 3 hours and 51 minutes, I said. "I am using them to look." Looking has been done. 7 came closer. Its feet made a clicking sound on the floor that I felt in my back teeth. 904 years of looking, by minds that do not tire, by the Auron who forget nothing, by the Synthar who are a billion thoughts at once. You are a man with one brain who reads old human books for money. What do you imagine you will see? I did not have a good answer, so I gave the honest one. I don't know yet. That seemed to satisfy something in it, or maybe disappoint it in a way it enjoyed. It settled into a corner to watch. They always watch. The humans before me had described it in their reports. You are never alone with the cipher. You are alone with the cipher and an audience that has already decided you are a clown. I walked the length of the slab, then I walked it again. I touched it once, just my fingertip, and pulled back fast. It was colder than the room, cold enough to hurt. "The surface temperature is fixed," 7 said, watching me flinch. "It does not change. Another thing that has been measured 10,000 times. "Right," I said. I kept walking. I was not really thinking about the marks yet. I was thinking about my mother, which is a thing my brain does when I am frightened, and I was frightened, though I would not have said so. She had a voice recorder once, a cheap little thing, near the end of her life, and she could never work it. She held it the wrong way around every single time. She would press the button and speak into the empty end and wonder why it never saved anything. I used to laugh at her. I would give a great deal now to hear one of those recordings she thought she was making. I shook that off. The clock does not care about your mother. Here is what 900 years of work had decided about the Vesh cipher, and I had read all of it on the transport in. The marks were a language. Everyone agreed on that. The trouble was that no arrangement of them produced meaning. Read left to right, nothing. Read in columns, nothing. Read as math, as music, as map, as code, as prayer, nothing and nothing and nothing. So the great minds had concluded that the meaning was not on the surface at all. The cipher, they said, was a shadow, a flat picture of something that lived in more dimensions than 3. To read it, you had to imagine the object that would cast this exact shadow, and no one had ever managed to imagine it correctly. That was the consensus, that was the wall. And the thing about a wall built by geniuses over 9 centuries is that nobody ever goes back and checks whether the ground under it is even flat. You are not taking notes, 7 observed. I'm bad at notes. I stopped at the center of the slab. There was a mark there that I had passed 4 times without really seeing it, the way you walk past your own front door. It was bigger than the others. A long curling stroke, like the tail of a comma drawn by someone falling asleep. Around it, the smaller marks gathered and bent, as if they were all leaning toward it. I stared at that one mark for a long time. 7, I said. When your people decided the meaning wasn't on the surface, what was the first thing you ruled out? A pause. Kelty pauses are precise. They are never confused. They are only choosing how much to tell you. Direction, it said finally. In the 3rd century of study, it was proven that reading direction is irrelevant. The marks produce no language in any sequence. Therefore, the sequence is not the carrier of meaning. This freed us to look elsewhere. It was considered an important early result. Proven, I repeated. By the Synthar, 1 billion processors, every possible reading order, tested against every known grammar and 10 million invented ones. I nodded slowly. My breath was still fogging. My fingers still hurt. But something small and warm had started up in the back of my skull, the feeling I get right before I understand something, the feeling that has paid my rent for 20 years. Because here was the thing. They had tested every reading order. Left, right, up, down, spirals, diagonals, every path you could trace across a flat surface. I believed that completely. The Synthar do not make mistakes like that. But every one of those readings had treated the marks, as symbols, as little pieces of meaning to be lined up in a row. What if they were not symbols at all? I did not say this. Saying it would have ended my 4 hours early. I had read enough human reports to know the pattern. A human notices something. A human says it out loud, too soon, too eager. The old species explain patiently why the human is wrong, and the human, who is new and unsure, believes them, because they are 900 years old and you have been on the station for 10 minutes. And then the human goes home, and the idea dies in the transport with them. So I kept my mouth shut and my face dull. I think you're right, I said to 7. Direction probably doesn't matter. It made a small sound. Satisfaction. The human had agreed. Good. I turned back to the slab and let my eyes go soft, the way you do when you are trying to see the picture hidden in a pattern of dots. And for 1/2 of 1 second before my eyes sharpened again on their own, the marks did something. They did not move. They had never moved, but they stopped being thousands of separate little shapes. For that half-second they were one shape. One single continuous line, drawn without lifting the pen, wandering up and down across all 14 meters of stone, and the up and the down of it were not random. Then my eyes locked back onto the details, and it was thousands of marks again. I stood very still. 7, I said, careful, light, like it did not matter. Stupid question. You have asked several. Has anyone ever turned it over? The clicking stopped. The whole room seemed to get quieter, though that made no sense, because the room had been silent the entire time except for that low hum in my teeth. Turned it over, 7 said. The words came out flat. It was not a question. It was the sound of a very old mind trying to decide if I was joking. Upside down, I said. Has anyone ever looked at the whole thing upside down? The cipher, 7 said slowly, is a 14-meter monolith of unknown material with a mass that requires a station crane to shift, and it is symmetrical along its vertical axis to within a margin of. I don't mean physically pick it up. I was already pulling out my reader, my hands not quite steady. I mean the data, the full surface scan, the map of every mark. Has anyone ever flipped that image and read it as one line instead of as separate symbols? Top becomes bottom. Read the whole slab as a single stroke going up and down, not left to right, not as letters, as one line that rises and falls. The pause this time was the longest yet. "Why," Seven said, "would anyone do that?" And there it was. That was the whole 900 years, right there, in 3 words. Why would anyone? Because they had ruled out direction in the 3rd century. Because they had proven the sequence did not matter. Because the foundation had been poured a very long time ago by very smart people. And nobody had ever once thought to go back and check whether the marks were even marks, whether up and down might mean something even if left and right did not, whether the whole magnificent cathedral of their study was built on a single quiet assumption that no one had questioned since before my species learned to fly. They were not stupid. I want to be clear about that. They were the furthest thing from stupid. They were so brilliant at the hard part that they had stopped, 9 centuries ago, checking the easy part. And the easy part was the part I was good at, because I was new and small and still dumb enough to ask the question out loud. "Humor me," I said. "I've got 3 hours and 38 minutes. Can you pull the full surface map to my reader?" Seven did not move for a moment. Then it made a gesture and my reader chimed, and the entire scanned surface of the Vesh cipher arrived in my cold hands. Every mark, every curl, 14 meters of mystery shrunk down to fit on a screen the size of a dinner plate. "You will find," Seven said, "exactly what we found. Marks that mean nothing in an order that means nothing, regardless of how you turn them." "Probably," I agreed. I sat down on the freezing floor with my back against the base of the monolith, because my legs had decided they were done. I held up the reader, and with one finger, slow, almost gentle, the way you turn a photograph of someone you have lost, I flipped the whole image upside down. The marks were upside down now, meaningless still. 1,000 little frost shapes now hanging from the top of my screen instead of standing on the bottom. I let my eyes go soft again. And the single continuous line came back. The one stroke, rising and falling across all that black stone, up and down, and now that it was inverted, now that the heavy curls hung downward where they belonged, I could see that the rising and falling had a rhythm, a shape, a pattern that climbed and dropped and climbed again, tighter here, looser there, and I knew that pattern. I had seen that exact pattern before, not in any language, in a textbook I had hated in school, a textbook about something that had nothing to do with words at all. My mouth went dry. My teeth stopped aching. I did not notice when the hum had become a sound I could not feel anymore, because I was not in my body anymore. I was somewhere behind my own eyes, staring at a thing that 900 years of galaxy had walked past, and I understood all at once that I was looking at it the wrong side up no longer. Behind me, Seven shifted on its angled legs. "Well," it said, there was something in its voice now that had not been there before, not respect, not yet. Something closer to the way you sound when a tool you were sure was broken makes a noise you do not recognize. I did not answer. 3 hours and 31 minutes left, and I was not going to need all of them. The galaxy had spent 9 centuries trying to read a message. Nobody had thought to check whether it was a message at all. They gave me 4 hours to fail. I had stopped failing somewhere in the first 30. I did not tell Seven what I had seen, not yet. I want to explain why, because it matters. It was not pride. I was not sitting there on a freezing floor hugging a secret to my chest like a child. It was fear, plain and simple. I had the pattern in front of me, the thing I recognized, and I knew that the second I said it out loud, the room would do to me what it had done to every human before me. It would explain. It would be patient. It would tell me, in the kind voice you use on the very young, exactly why I was wrong. And the worst part was that they might be right. 900 years is a long time to be wrong about something, but it is also a long time to learn every way a newcomer can be foolish. So I needed to be sure before I opened my mouth. I needed the kind of sure that no patient explanation could move. "You have gone quiet," Seven said. "I'm thinking." That is new for your species. I let that one pass. I was used to it by now. Humans had a reputation out here, and it was not a flattering one. We perceived errantly. That was the phrase from the diplomat's report, the one that had gotten my whole species filed under a heading that translated roughly as useful in the way a dropped tool is sometimes useful, by landing in an unexpected place. We were brought in for exactly that, to land somewhere strange, to be wrong in a direction nobody else thought to be wrong in. I was about to find out if I was wrong in a useful direction, or just the regular kind. I looked at the pattern on my screen again. The single rising and falling line. I have to describe what it reminded me of, even though describing it is half the danger, because describing it makes it real, and if it is real then I have to do something about it. When I was young, before languages, before any of this, I wanted to be an engineer. I was bad at it. I failed out of it in a single brutal year. But in that year I had spent long nights staring at one particular kind of picture, the kind that shows a sound drawn as a line. You speak into a machine, and the machine draws your voice as a line that climbs and drops, tight where the sound is high, loose where it is low, busy where there are many sounds packed together, and calm where there is silence. A waveform, that was the word, a picture of a sound frozen in place. That is what the Vesh cipher was. Upside down, read as one stroke instead of 1,000 symbols, it was a waveform. It was not a message written in a language. It was a recording of a voice. I felt something move through me that I did not have a name for, and I am a man whose whole job is finding names for things. 900 years. The Kelti, the Auron, the Sinthar, every great mind in the concordance, all of them had spent 9 centuries trying to translate a song. They had been so certain it was writing that it never once occurred to a single one of them to simply listen. Why would it? You do not listen to a wall, you read it. But the marks were not writing. The marks were the line a voice draws when it is recorded. And the reason no one had ever cracked it was the reason a man cannot read his own native language if you hand it to him upside down and tell him it is a code. They had been staring at sound and demanding that it become words, and sound does not become words by being stared at. Sound becomes words by being played. I needed to be sure. I have said that twice now, and I mean it both times. I zoomed in on one section of the inverted line, the busy part near the center where the heavy curling stroke sat that I had noticed an hour ago. In a waveform, a section like that means a loud, complicated sound, a burst, maybe a word with hard edges, and if the marks really were a recorded voice, then the spacing between the busy parts should not be random. Voices have rhythm. They pause. They breathe. The silences between sounds are as regular as a heartbeat, because the thing making the sounds has lungs, or whatever it has instead of lungs, and lungs need to work in time. I measured the gaps, by eye first, then with the reader's tools, the simple ones, the ones a failed engineering student could still remember how to use. The gaps were regular, not perfectly even, but regular the way breathing is regular. Long pause, short pause, long pause, a cluster of sound, a longer pause like the end of a sentence. There was breathing in the stone. Whatever had made these marks had paused to breathe. That was when I stopped being afraid of being wrong and started being afraid of being right. 7, I said. My voice came out rough. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to not explain to me why I'm an idiot for asking. Just answer it. Can you do that for the next 60 seconds? The pause was sharp. I had surprised it. Ask. In 900 years of study, did anyone ever try to play it? Play it flat again, but there was a crack in the flatness this time. Define the term. As sound. Did anyone ever take this surface, treat the marks as a recorded waveform, and convert them back into sound and listen to them? The cipher is not a recording. The patience was coming. I could hear it loading like a weapon being raised. It is a linguistic artifact. The marks are clearly symbolic in nature, exhibiting recurring motifs consistent with 60 seconds. 7. You said you could do it. It stopped. To its great credit, it stopped. I think that was the first moment it considered, even slightly, that I might not be a clown. No, it said. No one ever tried to play it. There would be no reason. One does not play a text. Right, I said. One does not play a text. I stood up. My legs had come back. The cold did not bother me anymore. None of it bothered me anymore, because I was full of the thing that fills you when you are close, the bright, clean thing that is better than any other feeling I have ever found, and I have looked. Here's my problem, I said. I don't have the gear to convert this. I'm a language man, I read. I don't build playback rigs. What I need is to take this waveform, this line, and feed it through something that turns a drawn sound back into an actual sound. And I need to do it before my 4 hours run out, because I have a very strong feeling that the moment I'm gone, this idea goes with me, and the next human gets the same 4 hours and the same monolith and the same audience telling them direction doesn't matter. 7 was very still. The hum filled the silence. I had stopped feeling it, but I knew it was there. You believe, it said slowly, that the Vesh cipher is a sound. I believe it's a voice. I believe somebody recorded their voice onto this stone, the way you'd carve a record, except they carved it as the picture of the sound instead of as grooves. And I believe everyone who's ever looked at it has been trying to read a face when they should have been listening to a mouth. That is not possible. You said that about turning it over 40 minutes ago. The Kelti do not have faces the way I do, but there are things that happen in the angles of them, small shifts, and I had been reading bodies and languages my whole life, and I watched something shift in 7 that I had not seen shift before. It was not belief. It was worse than belief for it. It was doubt. The doubt of a mind that had been certain for 900 years and had just been handed a question it could not immediately answer. If you are wrong, it said, you will have wasted the remainder of your allotment on a fantasy, and you will be remembered briefly as the human who thought a wall could sing. And if I'm right? It did not answer that. I do not think it could. The size of the if was too large to hold. There is equipment in the analysis bay, it said at last, and the words came out of it like they cost something. Audio reconstruction tools. We use them for spoken language artifacts, tools that take a recorded sound and clean it, or take a drawn frequency and produce a tone. They have never been pointed at the cipher, because the cipher is not a recording. But the tools exist. The tools exist. And I checked the reader, 3 hours and 4 minutes. You are not authorized to use the analysis bay. I looked at it. 14 meters of black stone behind me, full of a voice that nobody had heard in who knew how long, a voice that had been screaming into the silence of a dead star for 900 years, while the smartest beings in the galaxy stood in front of it and demanded it spell something. Then you'd better come authorize me, I said, because I am not leaving this station without hearing what this thing is trying to say. I have spent 20 years reading the words of people who are gone. I know what it looks like when somebody leaves a message they're afraid no one will ever find. And I am telling you, 7, with everything I am, that somebody left this one terrified. The hum seemed to rise then. Maybe the room had warmed by a degree. Maybe it was only in my head. 7 unfolded itself from the corner, all those angles straightening out, and for the first time since it had walked through the door, it was not looking at me the way you look at a dropped tool. Follow, it said, and if you are wrong, you will tell no one I assisted you. And if I'm right, then it will not matter what you tell anyone, it said. It will only matter what the stone said. We left the freezing room. I took one last look back at the monolith, at the thousands of little frost marks I now knew were not marks at all, and I thought, for no reason I could explain, about my mother and her recorder, speaking so carefully into the empty end, sure she was being saved. The galaxy had been holding the recorder the wrong way around for 900 years. I was about to turn it over. The analysis bay was warmer than the cipher's room, which my body thanked me for and my brain ignored. It was a long curved space full of equipment I half recognized and half did not. Down the center ran a working surface that lit up when you touched it. Around the walls stood machines that hummed at frequencies I could not feel, which meant they were built for ears, or whatever the concordance used instead of ears. There was someone already in the bay. She turned when we entered, and I saw she was human, which I had not expected, and which knocked me sideways for a second. She was about my age, maybe younger, with tired eyes and the particular stillness of a person who has learned that moving too fast in a room full of older species gets you noticed in the wrong way. 7, she said, with a nod that was careful. Then she looked at me and something passed over her face. Recognition almost. The recognition of one stray dog for another. You're the new one, the language contractor. Wendell, I said. Margaret, she did not offer a hand. We had both learned, I think, that gestures meant for humans look strange to the things that watch us. They give you the 4 hours too. I'm in hour 2. She laughed, but it was not a happy sound. I got my 4 hours 3 years ago. I solved nothing. They kept me on anyway in the bay doing audio cleanup on spoken artifacts. The concordance keeps a few of us around. We're cheap, and once in a while one of us drops a tool somewhere useful. She tilted her head. What are you doing in here? Nobody brings a language contractor to the audio bay. Languages are read. I looked at 7. 7 looked at me. There was a strange long moment where the whole thing balanced on a point, and I understood that if I said it wrong, if I sounded like a man who thought a wall could sing, even this exhausted woman who had failed the same way I might be about to fail would close her face and explain to me why I was a fool. So I said it, the way I had learned to say things over 20 years of handling the words of the dead. I think the cipher isn't a text, I said. I think it's a recording of a voice. I think the marks are a waveform and everyone's been trying to read it instead of play it. And I think if we put it through your tools, it'll make a sound. Margaret did not laugh. That was the first thing. She did not laugh and she did not explain and she did not look at me like a dropped tool. She went very still, the way a person goes still when you say a thing they have thought themselves, late at night, and pushed away because it was too simple to be true. Say that again, she said quietly. It's a voice. Upside down, read as one continuous line, it's a waveform. The gaps are regular, there's breathing in it. She crossed the bay so fast that 7 made a small sound of alarm. She stopped in front of me with her hand out for my reader, and I gave it to her, and she looked at the inverted image with the heavy curling stroke at the center, and I watched her face do the thing my face had done on the freezing floor. I watched her go somewhere behind her own eyes. I used to do sound, she whispered. Before languages, I worked with recordings. Cleaning old voice files, she looked up at me. How did nobody? Because they ruled out direction 900 years ago, I said. And because you don't play a wall. You don't play a wall, she repeated, and then she laughed again, but it was a different laugh this time, high and a little wild, the laugh of a person who has just seen the floor open under everything she thought was solid. 7. 7, do you understand what he's saying? Do you understand that if he's right, your entire field, the whole 900 years, every paper, every framework, all of it was a category error? You were translating a sound. That conclusion is premature, 7 said, but its voice had lost something. The certainty was draining out of it by the second, and a Keltie without certainty is a strange and almost pitiful thing, like a clock that has stopped trusting its own hands. Then let's unpremature it, Margaret said. She was already moving to the working surface, already pulling up tools, her hands quick and sure in a way they probably had not been in 3 years. Give me the full surface map, not the inverted version, the raw one. I'll flip it myself. I want to do it clean. I sent her the file. She caught it on the working surface and spread it out, 14 meters of marks blooming across the glowing table, and then with 2 fingers she rotated the whole thing, and the marks hung upside down, and the single line came alive again, climbing and dropping across the table. "There," I said softly, "see it as one stroke." "I see it." Her voice had gone almost to nothing. "Sweet mercy, I see it. That's a waveform, that's a clean recorded waveform. The dynamic range, the rhythm of the peaks." She stopped. 7. This was carved. Somebody carved a sound into stone by hand or by tool as a literal picture of the sound. Do you know what that means? It means they didn't have the technology to record it any other way, or they had it and they wanted it to last. They wanted it to outlive any machine. So they put it in the one form that would survive a dead star and 900 years, and a galaxy full of geniuses who'd never think to listen. The hum of the bay seemed to deepen, or maybe that was only the blood in my own ears. "Can you play it?" I said. Margaret's hand stopped. "I can try," she said. "But Wendell, listen to me. If this is a voice, if this is real, we don't know what's on it. We don't know what species. We don't know what it's saying. The Oran forget nothing, and the Oran have never heard this, which means it's nobody the concordance has on record. Whatever made these marks, the galaxy doesn't know it exists." She looked at me, and the wild laugh was gone now, replaced by something more solemn. "Some things are buried on purpose. Some recordings are left where they are because the person who made them is gone, and what they have to say is too heavy to carry. Are you sure you want to be the one who picks it up?" I thought about my mother and her recorder. I thought about every dead language I had ever read, every last word of every last speaker, every message left for a future that the speaker hoped existed and feared did not. "That's the whole job," I said, "picking up what people leave behind. Somebody carved their voice into a mountain and threw it at a dead star because they wanted to be heard before the silence took them. We're the first ones in 900 years who figured out how to listen. We don't get to walk away from that." Margaret held my eyes for a long moment. Then she nodded once and turned back to the table. "Then let's listen," she said. 7. I need the audio reconstruction array, all of it. And I need you to not stop me, because I am about to do a thing this bay was never meant to do. And if you alert anyone before we have a result, they'll shut us down out of 900 years of pride, and we will never get this chance again." 7 did not move for a long, terrible moment. "My people," it said quietly, "have studied this object for 30 generations, careers, lifetimes. The reputations of our greatest minds are built upon the assumption that it is a text. If you are correct, all of that becomes a monument to a mistake so simple that a human in his second hour saw it. It turned its angled head toward the working surface, toward the upside-down line that breathed. And yet, Margaret said. "And yet I find that I would rather know," 7 said, "than be proud. Proceed. I will not stop you. I will stand here and I will watch a wall sing, and I will learn whether I have wasted my life. I have heard a lot of brave things said in a lot of languages. That one is near the top." Margaret's hands flew across the surface. She pulled the waveform into the reconstruction array and began the work of turning a picture back into a pressure, a drawn line back into a moving wave of air. The thing of voice is before it ever becomes a sound you can hear. She muttered as she worked, half to herself, half to me, things about sample rates and amplitude scaling and a dozen choices that could go wrong, because nobody had ever done this, because there was no manual for uncarving a mountain into a mouth. "I'm guessing on the playback speed," she said. "I don't know how fast they spoke. I don't know if they spoke at all or sang or screamed. I'm setting it to something close to a human range and will adjust." She looked up. "Last chance, both of you. Once I press this, the bay logs it and there's no pretending we didn't." "Press it," I said. "Press it," 7 said, and I swear its voice shook. Margaret pressed it. For a moment nothing, the bay hummed. The line sat upside down on the glowing table, climbing and dropping, breathing its regular breaths. Then the array warmed up, and the first sound came out of it, and every living thing in that room stopped. It was not noise. It was not random. It was not the hiss of an old recording or the crackle of a damaged file. It was a voice. A real voice speaking, in a language none of us had ever heard, in a tone that needed no translation at all, because some things cross every barrier between every kind of mind. The voice was speaking carefully, slowly, the way you speak when you want very badly to be understood and you are not at all sure that you will be. And under the words, woven through every careful syllable, was a feeling I had spent my whole life learning to recognize in the languages of the dead. It was the sound of someone who knew they were the last. Margaret's hand went to her mouth. Seven sank down on its angled legs as though something had been cut, and I stood in the middle of the bay with my own dead mother's recorder somewhere in the back of my mind, listening to a voice that had been carved into stone and thrown across 900 years of silence in the hope, the desperate hope, that someday, somewhere, somebody would be foolish enough to turn it over. "Wendell," Margaret whispered, not looking away from the table, "it's talking to us." "No," I said. My own voice did not sound like mine. "It's talking to whoever found it. It just never thought anyone would." The voice kept speaking, and we kept listening, and nothing in the galaxy was ever going to be the same. We did not understand a word of it, not at first. That is the thing nobody tells you about finding the answer. The answer is not the end. The answer is a door, and behind the door is a hallway full of more doors, and you are standing there holding a voice you cannot read in a language nobody alive has ever heard. But I read languages. That is the entire point of me. And a voice is a far better thing to read than a wall, because a voice has rhythm and stress and breath tells you where the sentences end, and the places a speaker slows down tell you what matters to them, and the places they speed up tell you what frightens them. I had spent 20 years reading the dead. I had never once got to hear them. Now I could hear one, and I went to work. "Play it again," I said, "from the start, slower." Margaret slowed it down and the voice dropped into something deeper, and the deepness somehow made the loneliness in it worse, but I pushed that aside and listened to the shape. There were repeated sounds, a pattern at the start of each section, the way a person might begin each new thought with the same small phrase. "Here is, here is, here is." I did not know the words, but I knew the shape of a list, the shape of someone counting through things they needed to say in order, because they were afraid of running out of time before they said them all. "It's structured," I said. "It's not a ramble. This is somebody who planned every word. They knew exactly what they wanted to leave behind and they said it in order." "How can you tell?" Seven asked. It had pulled itself back up from the floor. Its certainty was gone, but something new had come into it, a hunger, the hunger of a mind that had spent 900 years on the wrong path and had just been handed the right one. "Because I've read 100 messages like this," I said. "Different species, different worlds, same situation. The last speaker of a language, recording everything they can before the silence takes the words with them. They always sound the same, underneath. They always start with the most important thing, in case they don't get to finish." "And what is the most important thing?" Seven said. I held up a hand. I was listening to the first section, the one that repeated the asterisk here is asterisk shape over and over, and I was matching the sounds to the heavy carved strokes on the inverted line, building the smallest bridge in the world between a sound and a meaning. This is how you read a dead language with no key. You find the part that repeats, because repetition means structure, and structure means rules, and rules can be cracked. You find the words that come back again and again, because the words a dying speaker repeats are the words they cannot bear to lose. And then, slowly, terribly, you build a guess, and you test the guess against the next section. And if it holds, you build another, and brick by brick, over hours that feel like minutes, you make a wall of understanding out of a wall of frost. It took the rest of my 4 hours, and then it took more, because Seven, somewhere in there, quietly extended my allotment without asking anyone, and Margaret stopped checking the clock entirely. The three of us bent over the glowing table while the voice spoke its careful, frightened list into a bay that had never been meant to hear it. And bit by bit, I began to understand. "It's a name," I said near the start. "The first thing, the repeated thing, it's a name. They're naming themselves." I closed my eyes and listened to the careful sounds. "I can't say it the way they say it. My mouth isn't built for it. But it's a name, and they say it 3 times slowly, like they're teaching it to a child. Like they want to be sure that whoever hears this learns to say it right." "They want it to be remembered," Margaret said softly. "Everyone does," I said. "That's the most human thing there is, and apparently it isn't only human." We kept going. The voice moved from the name into the long "here is asterisk" section, and I built the bridge wider, and the words began to come, not all of them, not cleanly, but enough. "Here is my world. Here is the color of my sky. Here is the sound the water made. Here is the song we sang when the long dark came. Here is how we counted the seasons. Here is the name we gave the brightest star. Here is what we believed happened to us after." A whole world, a whole people, carved into a mountain by their last living member, who knew that everything they were about to lose, the sky and the water and the songs, would vanish completely the moment they stopped speaking, and so they spoke. They spoke until they had carved the entire shape of their existence into stone, and then they threw it at a dead star, because a dead star does not decay, and stone does not rot, and a recording carved as a picture of sound can outlast every machine and every empire and every clever assumption a galaxy might make about what a wall is for. Margaret had stopped working. She was just listening now, with tears on her face that she was not bothering to hide, and Seven stood beside her, perfectly still, in a posture I had never seen a Keltie hold, and which I later learned was the shape they make only in the presence of the dead. "Why did they not simply ask for rescue?" Seven said. Its voice was very quiet. "If they were the last, why not a call for help? Why a museum? Why the color of the sky and the sound of the water? These things cannot save them." "Because they knew help wasn't coming," I said. The understanding had settled into me like cold water. You don't carve the color of your sky into a mountain if you think someone's going to come pull you off the rock. You do that when you've accepted that you're going to end, and the only thing left to decide is whether you end completely, or whether some piece of you, the sky, the water, the song, gets to exist in someone else's mind after you're gone. I looked at the inverted line on the table, the breathing line, the voice made visible. "They weren't asking to be saved," I said. "They knew that was impossible. They were asking to be known. That's a different thing, and it's a smaller thing, and it's the only thing they had left, and they spent everything they had making sure they got it. They couldn't survive, but they could refuse to be forgotten. So they carved themselves into the one shape that could outlast forgetting, and they trusted, against all the odds, that someday someone would be foolish enough to turn it over and patient enough to listen." The bay was silent except for the voice. "900 years," Margaret whispered. 900 years they were here, talking, and the smartest beings in the galaxy stood in front of them and demanded they be a puzzle to solve instead of a person to hear. "That's the part that's going to keep me up," I said. "Not that we couldn't read it, that we never thought to listen. A whole people, screaming their entire existence into the dark, and the galaxy treated them like a math problem. We treated a goodbye like a code." Seven made a sound I had not heard it make. A long, low note, almost broken. "I have given my life to this object," it said. "I built my reputation on the framework that it was a higher dimensional text. I taught that framework to others. There are minds across the concordance who believe it because I told them to believe it." It turned toward me, all its angles softened in a way I would not have thought a Keltie could manage. "And it was never a text. It was a dying person, and I spent 40 years refusing to hear them because I was too certain to listen. You saw it in 2 hours, not because you are wiser than I am. You are not, but because you were new enough and small enough and unsure enough to ask the question that certainty forbade. I did not know what to say to that. I am good with the words of the dead. I am worse with the words of the living. You were doing the hard part, I said finally. For 900 years your people did the hardest part there is. You kept the thing safe. You scanned every mark. You preserved every detail so perfectly that when somebody finally asked the dumb question, the answer was already sitting there, waiting, complete. I couldn't have done any of this if you hadn't kept it for 9 centuries. I just turned it over. You're the reason there was anything to turn. 7 was quiet for a moment. That is kind, it said. It is also, I think, true. Both things at once. The galaxy needed 900 years of brilliance to preserve the question, and 1 afternoon of foolishness to answer it. Perhaps that is how all real answers come. The voice on the recording was reaching its final section now. I could hear the change in it, the way the breathing got shorter, the way the careful pace began to fray, just slightly, the way a person's voice frays when they are coming to the end of a thing they have been holding together by will alone. We all heard it. We all went still. It's almost done, Margaret said. Whatever the last thing is, it's coming. And I realized, with a feeling that started in my chest and spread out to my numb fingers, that I was about to hear the last words of the last member of an entire people, carved 900 years ago into a mountain and thrown at a dead star, and that no living being in the whole galaxy had ever heard them, and that for some reason that I would never fully understand, it had fallen to me, a cheap human in his second hour, to be the one to finally listen. I leaned in close to the table. Bring it up, I said. Every bit of volume you've got. I don't want to miss a single sound. Margaret brought it up. And the voice, frayed and slowing and almost gone, began to say its last thing. It was short. That was what undid me. After everything, the world and the sky and the water and the songs, the last thing was short. I built the bridge as fast as I could, matching the final sounds to the final marks, and the meaning came through in pieces, and the pieces assembled themselves into something so simple that I had to say it out loud twice before I believed it. If you can hear this, I said slowly, reading the breaking voice, then I was not wrong to hope. Thank you for turning it over. Thank you for being the kind of mind that checks. And then the voice stopped, not cut off, not broken, just finished the way a person finishes when they have said the one thing they stayed alive to say. The line on the table came to its end. The breathing breaths ran out. The recording was over. Nobody in the bay moved for a long time. Thank you for being the kind of mind that checks, Margaret repeated in barely a whisper. They knew. Wendell, they knew. Whoever carved this, they understood exactly how they were going to be missed. They knew a galaxy might find them and treat them as a code, and they left a thank you at the very end for the one who wouldn't. They were a linguist too, maybe, I said. My throat hurt. Or whatever their word for it was. Somebody who understood that the hardest thing in the universe isn't being clever, it's being clever enough to remember to be simple. 7 had not spoken since the voice ended. When it finally did, its words came carefully, the way you walk on ground you are no longer sure of. There were coordinates, it said. In the final third of the recording, I did not mention them while the voice still spoke because it felt wrong to interrupt, but there is a sequence in there that the array flagged. Numbers, a location. I had heard it too, woven into the section about the brightest star and what they believed happened to them after. I had taken it for poetry. It was not poetry. They left a map, Margaret said. They left the way back to where they were, 7 said. Their world, or what remains of it. The recording was made on the surface of the cipher's monolith, but the monolith was found in a dead system far from anywhere we have records of intelligent life. The coordinates point elsewhere, to a place the concordance has never charted. A place where, if the recording is true, an entire people lived and sang and counted their seasons and named their brightest star, and then ended, alone, with no one to remember them but a mountain. I looked at the 3 of us, standing around a glowing table in a quiet bay, holding the only copy of a dead world's heart. Then somebody should go, I said. Somebody should go and find their world and stand on it and know its name, so that when the next mind asks who they were, there's an answer, not a code, an answer. That, Seven said, is not a decision for the three of us. The concordance will want this, all of it. The recording, the method, the coordinates. There will be committees, there will be claims. There will be a great many old and powerful minds who do not enjoy being told that their 900 years were spent holding a recorder the wrong way around. It paused. And there will be a question, asked very loudly, of how a human in his second hour solved what 30 generations could not. A cold feeling went through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. They're going to take it, I said. Aren't they? The work, the credit, the whole thing. Almost certainly, Seven said, and I appreciated that it did not lie to me. You are a contractor, you are cheap, you perceive errantly. The concordance has a long history of finding it more comfortable to say that a thing was discovered through the slow accumulation of its own brilliance than to say it was discovered because a small new mind asked an obvious question the large old minds had forbidden themselves to ask. They will write it up. Your name will be a footnote if it appears at all. The method will be credited to the institution. And the voice, it gestured at the table, the voice will become an exhibit, studied, catalogued, filed. I should have been angry. The system prompt of my whole life, the part of me that has been pushed around by older and richer and more powerful things for as long as I can remember, wanted to be angry, and anger is a sweet and familiar thing, easy to reach for, steadying. But I looked at the line on the table, the finished line, the voice that had asked for nothing but to be known, and I found I did not want the anger after all. Let them, I said. Margaret turned to me, Wendell. Let them have the credit, let them have the committees and the claims and the footnotes. I was surprised by how calm I felt. I didn't do this to get a name on a paper, neither did you. And neither, sweet mercy, did whoever carved themselves into that mountain. They didn't want credit, they wanted to be heard, and they were, by us, today. That happened, and no committee can unhappen it. I looked at Seven. But I want one thing, not for me, for them. Name it, Seven said. When the concordance writes this up, I said, however they want to tell the story, however small they want to make me, I want the name in it, their name. The one they said 3 times slowly like they were teaching it to a child. I want that name to be the first thing on every record, not the method, not the institution, not me, them. Because the whole point, the entire point of 900 years and a dead star and a mountain full of a voice, was so that name would not be forgotten. If the concordance takes everything else, fine. But they will say that name, and they will say it right, or I will tell every human contractor in the galaxy exactly how easy this was to solve, and exactly how long the great old minds failed to ask. The bay was silent. Then Seven did something I will remember for the rest of my life. It bent. The Kelty do not bow, not to anyone, not in 900 years of records, but Seven folded its angles down, low, toward the table where the voice lay finished, and it held the shape it had held only for the dead. Their name will be first, it said. I will spend whatever remains of my reputation to make it so. It is the least I owe them for the 40 years I refused to listen. It straightened. And it is the least I owe you, Wendell HFY, for teaching an old and certain mind the most difficult thing it has ever learned. Which is? To check the obvious, Seven said, before building a cathedral on top of it. They came for the work within the week, exactly as Seven said they would. The committees convened. The claims were made. The method was credited to the institution, and my name became a footnote, and Margaret's did not appear at all, and we both knew it would go that way, and neither of us minded as much as we should have. But on every record, on every catalog entry, in every paper across the whole concordance, the first thing, before the method and the institution and the dead star and the 900 years, is a name. A name that my human mouth cannot say correctly, written out as close as the array could render it, with a note beneath it in the Kelty's own hand. spoken 3 times slowly so that it would be learned. Learn it. I kept one thing for myself. 7 looked the other way while I did it, which I think was its own small rebellion against 900 years of pride. I made a copy of the recording, just the voice, the whole careful, frightened, magnificent list of a world that no longer exists, ending in a thank you to whoever was foolish enough to turn it over. I put it on a cheap chip, the cheapest I could find, the kind my mother could never work, and I keep it in my pocket. Wrong side up on purpose, the way she always held hers. I never explained why to anyone, and I am not going to start now. The galaxy spent 900 years being brilliant. The whole time, a voice was waiting in the dark, asking only to be heard, and the answer was sitting right there on the surface, in plain sight, for anyone willing to do the one thing that all that brilliance had forgotten how to do. Turn it over. Check the obvious. Listen. I was cheap. I perceived errantly. I was the lowest-ranked mind in every room I ever walked into out there. And I was the one who heard them. I would not trade that for every name on every paper in the whole wide galaxy. Some things are worth more than credit. A voice in the dark, finally answered after 900 years, is one of them. Their name is first now. That is enough. That was always all they wanted. And every night before I sleep, I take the cheap chip out of my pocket and I hold it the wrong way around, just for a moment, and I think about a mountain thrown at a dead star by someone who refused to vanish completely. Then I put it away, wrong side up, and I rest. Because somewhere, the obvious is still waiting to be checked. And somebody has to be foolish enough to do it.